All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to be showing you how we created this clip in After Effects using a few assets from Make Big Films, some smoke assets, and some of the plugins. Some of them are paid, some of them are not, but generally speaking, you can really just use the native plugins and get the exact same effect. So don't be too concerned about that. And I will just show you the variations in between. And the point of this tutorial, especially coming from Instagram, where I asked you guys, I'm like, hey, did you guys want to see a breakdown on this? And majority of people said yes, because I mean, I guess they're interested in the procedural editing that went behind it, is me trying to actually make this video where I show you from start to finish what I did to get the results that you see on the screen. So it's not going to be a chop and mix and mash of a bunch of stuff where you guys are left confused in between. It's just going to be showing you from start to finish what I did to get what you guys seen I showed at the start of this video. So, I mean, no more talking, let's get straight into it. So the first thing I typically do when I start a project is I'll organize all of the footage, the visual effects assets, and the pre-comps into different folders, as you can see over here. And the reason I do this is because when you're doing a lot of pre-comps or putting a lot of visual effects assets in different places, it can get really jarring and confusing finding out where things are. So my advice to people typically is to organize your stuff inside of your project window before you even get started. So, all right, let's just get straight into it now. So first thing I'm gonna do is open up that footage folder I have here. I'm gonna delete that because, I mean, I already started, but I don't really need that right there right now. So we're gonna go here and put this into the pre-comp window. And now we have our first pre-comp, which is gonna be what we're working on. So we'll call this plate 1. And from here, you can see it's desaturated and it's all log footage. So what I typically do, because sometimes it doesn't have enough contrast to get a good track, is I'll add a levels effect, and I will just pull back the blacks to the levels they need to be, and pull back your highlights, and then add some contrast back into the scene. And what you want to actually do is duplicate this layer before you do that, but I kind of just forgot because I'm so used to doing it. And we're going to call this track. Sorry, track right there. And then I'm just going to disable this bottom layer because I really don't need it. And then we're going to pre-compose this right now and move all attributes into the new composition. And the reason we're doing this is because if you want to do a 3D track in After Effects and you have the effects on that layer and it's not pre-comped, it's going to ignore the effects that you put on there, and then it's just going to track what the native footage looks like. And we actually want it to have more contrast and stuff, so pre-comp this, and then we're going to do the 3D track on this layer specifically. And actually, before we do that, what I'm going to do is find the area that we're actually working with, which is where the reaction takes place. So something around over here. Highlight both your clips holding Command, and then we're going to press Command-Shift-D where we want to cut, and then we're going to find where the clip's going to end, probably around somewhere around over here. So around here. Yep, and then we're going to press Command-Shift-D there, and then we're just going to highlight these regions over here, holding the Command button again on Mac. And then we're just going to grab these two, bring them back to the beginning of the clip, and then we're just going to drag this bar to the end of that clip. We're going to right click just before it and trim comp to work area. And now we have the spot that we're working with so that we don't have to 3D track a bunch of data that we really don't need. So now we're going to 3D track this. Okay, so now that we have a solid 3D track inside the area, I'm going to select a region over here with these tracking points where I want to create a solid so that I have a reference for the position data that I want to put the asset that I'm bringing into the scene into. So we're just going to select, maybe not over there, excuse me. We're just going to select maybe this area over here, and we're going to create a null and camera. And if you go back over and you click the null, you can actually skim through the footage and see if it's actually placed in the scene where you want it to be. So that's looking pretty good to me. So the next thing I'm going to do is, because I already got the tracking data I needed from here, is I'm just going to disable this track comp clip and put it to the bottom, and then we're going to activate back the plate clip that we're working with initially. And as you can see, we have the 3D track here, and it applies to this scene because it was the same thing. We just used that composition so that we can get a better track because we had more contrast inside of the scene. So the next thing that we're going to do is kind of get into the good part, which is bringing in the visual effects asset and trying to blend it into the scene to make it look a lot better. So the plate scene over here, I'm actually going to take off this levels effect because I don't need it. And the reason I'm taking it off is because we're trying to blend this visual effects asset with the log footage so that it fits into the scene more. The issue you run into sometimes is those assets are already in Rec 709 in a sRGB color space, and we're trying to match it going backwards to what we have for this log footage. So let me just show you a bit of the process that I use to actually do this. So I'm going to grab this dragon comp over here. I think this is shoutouts, the light, and that's the right. Okay, perfect. So we're just going to drag this into the composition over here. And as you can see, we have it inside the scene. We're just going to make it a 3D layer. We're just going to adjust it a bit because I feel like it's just offset a bit too much. And then we're just going to position it where we want it to be inside the scene. So maybe something around over here. And let's make it a bit bigger. Yep, because that monster I feel like would be a lot bigger than I am if I ran into that. Something around here. Okay, perfect. So if we skim through the scene again, you could see that we have it inside the scene perfectly tracked, and we have this wing over here, and I don't really like that. So what I can do to get around it is one of two things. I'm going to click that layer again. I'm going to push it further into the Z space, maybe around here, and then we're just going to move it over a tad bit. And then we're going to put it down, and we should have it not cross over where I am. I can just rotoscope myself out the scene, but for sake of this tutorial, I'm just trying to kind of like cheat it a bit to make it easier for you guys to understand the concept I'm using to blend this together. So there's one or two ways you can go about this. You can use a levels effect, and you can match it with the darks and the highlights inside of the scene. And you can adjust the midtones a bit in between, or you can use the match levels plugin. One or two works, so I'll show you both ways that you can do it. So you can download this. I'll put a link in the description. It's a free plugin. It's actually really good. We're going to use the match levels plugin over here, and you're just going to click at the bottom here, and where it says input black and input white, it's pretty much the input from the actual asset that you have. Sometimes I press it, sometimes I don't, but what's more important is the output white and the output black. So you can take the output blacks and you can go to something dark inside the scene, and that can either be where I am, my backpack, something around here, and boom, you can see it matches the blacks to the black levels inside of the scene, using that as a reference. And then we can go to the whites and we can use something down there. And as you can see, that brings it pretty damn close to what it should look like if it's in this scene. Now, the other issue we're having is, well, can't be stepping on top of the grass. That just looks a bit weird. And there's a few techniques we can use to get around this, but the main one I'm going to show you is actually masking it out so that we can blend it in to make it look like it's obscured by the grass. And we might need to cheat a little bit more because I don't want it to overlap with where the background is over there. So we're going to select this layer. We're going to use a masking tool, and we're just going to draw a mask right around where the feet are inside this image, something around there. Now I want you to press M twice, and then we're going to click inverted, and we have the feet cut off now, but we're going to do something else. So we're going to hit M a couple more times. There you go. We're going to bring up the mask feather, and we're just going to feather it out a tad bit like so, and then we're going to play with the mask expansion until we get something that's where we want it to be inside the scene. And then we're going to play with the feather value a tad bit more to make sure it's blended in a little more accurately. And if you don't like the way this looks, press one of the points, Command A, and we're just going to drag this down until we find a point where it's obscuring it enough that it looks realistic. So yeah, I think something around here is pretty decent for where we're going. And as you can see, it kind of hides the feet a bit inside the scene, and we're going to use a few other techniques to really blend that in to make it sell a bit better. So the next thing we're going to do with this is, typically when you're working with footage like this, log footage is extremely desaturated in comparison to the assets that you're bringing in. So we're going to use a hue and saturation effect, and the master saturation, we're just going to bring it down to about, I'd say -60 or 70. I think -60 is pretty good. And as you can see, the colors are kind of muted more and matching with how this scene actually looks, which is kind of what we're going for. And if you find that the blend for the shadows and the highlights aren't where you want them to be, what you can do is come down to this multiplier, and you can actually slide it left or right to wash it out to match the scene more. And I'm gonna say something around over here is making me a little more confident with how this is looking inside the scene. Just adjusting the contrast also too. So something like this seems like it's blending in fairly well already with how this scene's looking. So we're gonna move on to the next step. So we have the levels adjustment with this, we have the hue and saturation. And then the next thing that we're going to use is the curves effect. Actually, you know what? We're not going to use the curves effect yet. We're going to do something else. So I want to get an accurate representation of what this is going to look like in the Rec 709 space. So what you'd want to do is put the LUT back on your plate footage so that we can convert it to the Rec 709. So I'm just going to put, not LUT actually, we're going to use Lumetri color. We're going to go to basic correction. We're going to put input LUT, and then we're going to choose a LUT that brings it back into the space. So I have my own LUT collection, one that I purchased. It is actually from the Phantom Airy LUTs. I find these really good. So I'm going to use the neutral space for this one, and that's going to bring my footage back into the Rec 709 space, so it's more accurate. As you can see, some of the exposures are just blown out and not where they need to be. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to add a curves effect, and I am just going to drop down these shadows to where they should be. The highlights are just way too blown out. So I think that's decent for where I'm at as far as that's concerned. And then I'm going to go back to Lumetri color, and the highlights, I'm going to drop them down significantly, and you can see where it's actually bringing the clouds back and give me the dynamic range that I'm looking for. And I'm gonna just kind of punch in a tad bit and look at it. So to get something similar to match the Rec 709 space and to put it into the same kind of color science too, I'm going to use the Lumetri color effect on this dragon too. And we're just gonna go to basic correction. We're gonna go to input LUT, and we're gonna choose the exact same LUT that we're using for this one too. And now it should look something similar inside of this space. And as you can see, it's a little too washed out for how it's supposed to look. So we can go to this multiplier and we can just drop it down until we find something that matches into what this scene would actually look like. And I think something like this actually looks pretty damn decent for where we're trying to go as far as I am concerned. So, but now that we kind of got a good idea of where this is going and how it's supposed to look, another issue we're running into is how sharp the image actually is in the scene. As you can see, it doesn't look realistic at all, because when we look at where the grass is, it's pretty blurred, and you'd want to replicate that inside of your footage. So we're going to add a camera lens blur effect. Sorry about that. Camera lens blur effect over here. And we're going to turn the roundness up to 100, and we are going to use a blur radius of, let's say 2, maybe 2. It's pretty good. Yeah, I'd say 2 is around 2 is pretty good. I like the way that 2 looks inside of this scene. And another thing too is I want it to look more like post-apocalyptic, kind of like more muted tones and not as saturated. So I think a good way to go about that would be to go back to my plate footage and use a hue and saturation effect on this. And I'm just going to sample out where the yellows are, and I'm just going to change the hue of it to make it more of like a brownish color, something around here. And then we're going to go to our reds, and we're going to try and do something similar, but what we're going to try and do is we're going to desaturate it a lot more, and then we're going to push the tones toward more of a muted tone, something like that. And then even these yellows, I really don't like how saturated they are in the scene, so I'm just going to take down the saturation a bit, and that's what's going to give it more of that post-apocalyptic look. And I kind of like the way this is looking already, matching in with the scene. And I'm not sure I'm a big fan of how saturated this dragon is either, so we're just going to go over here, and maybe it's the saturation lightness that we're not liking, the master lightness. No, that's not it. It is these reds, and I don't like them. A little too bright for my liking, and then we're just going to desaturate those reds inside of it too. All right, I'm kind of liking where this is going so far. So another thing that I did inside of this footage when you guys are watching is sometimes I'll add a reference LUT to it so that I can see how I want all of this to look once I'm heading there. So we're going to rename this LUT, and then we're going to use another LUT that I really like a lot, and this is called the distant teal. So we're going to go back to my settings over here. We're going to head down and we're going to look for, there it is. It's in this gamut immersion LUT package, really good LUT package, and we're going to use distant teal. And as you can see, this kind of just puts more of like this teal look on it, and I really like the way this image is starting to look now. So I feel like we have a good space we're working in right now to kind of put this all together. And then another thing that really blends these scenes together a lot is you want to start adding visual effects assets, and sometimes you can use them to obscure things to make it look like it blends a bit better and add some dimension to it. So we're going to be doing a few different things to try and accomplish this. So I have this effect here called cinematic fog I really like, and then dispersed fog over here, and we're going to do a few different things with these assets to make this look a bit better. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the dispersed fog effect. As you can see, we have it right here. And we're going to just use a screen blending mode for it. I think something around here looks pretty cool. Let's make it a little bigger. And this is what's going to help actually hide a bit of what's happening over here. We're going to make it a 3D layer. As you can see, it's going to move with the scene quite a bit. And I don't like the bottom half of that, so what I will do is I'll add another mask right here. We'll put a mask on here. Again, hit the M button a few times, click inverted, and we're just going to feather it out a tad bit, right around something around here. And then let's play with the expansion until we find something we like that works with this scene. So sorry. Yeah. Something around there looks pretty good. And then we're gonna add a tint effect also to it. And we're just gonna tint these whites to like more of like a brownish color, like that kind of follows. So we're gonna go around here. Say the brown would be somewhere around there. Something around there looks pretty good. And then we're gonna turn down the opacity. Not to 0, but like maybe around 60% is pretty decent. And it adds kind of like this atmosphere and this fog that helps blend in, especially where the feet are, so you're not noticing it as much. Maybe I'll put this to 70 just so we can obscure that part a bit more. And then to add some more dimension to this scene, we're going to duplicate that layer. We're going to offset it a tad bit, and then we're going to push it back a lot more. Sorry, we're going to put this underneath of the dragon, then we're going to push it back a lot more. Yeah, now you see where when you push it in Z space, it goes behind where the dragon is, and we're just going to scale it up. And we're going to put it around over there, right around here. And if you could see, I'm not sure if you could see it fully, but add some more dimension to the background, and it kind of just blends it in more with the scene. And then maybe we're going to try this. We're going to see where it goes. I'm going to duplicate it one more time. We're going to put it around over here. And I kind of just like the way that it adds more atmosphere inside of this scene. But this one in the front, I'm not a big fan of. I think it's too obvious, so we're going to turn down the opacity a tad bit more on that one too. And then for the front over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this cinematic fog. We're going to dump it into the scene. You know what? Actually, what we're going to do is, duplicate this clip over here, hold down Option, and select the footage that you want to replace the clip with. And this is cool because what it does is it inherits everything that you've done in terms of effects or anything and puts it on that clip. So it avoids you having to go through the process of copy and pasting and redoing things that you know are going to be similar in the clip that you're bringing in. So again, hold Option, select the clip that you want to replace, and then it's going to go into the scene, but it's going to inherit all of the values that were in here. So I'm not sure if this one's here. There we go. And this is in the foreground, so we're going to want to make sure that it kind of matches more of this area. And I feel like this smoke might be a bit too obvious. So what we're gonna do is add a camera lens blur. Sorry about that. We're gonna add a camera lens blur effect. We're gonna turn up the roundness and we're gonna turn that to about 3. And that's what's gonna add some atmosphere to where I am in the front of the scene. And I just wanna see actually, we're gonna click the solo button. We're gonna see where this smoke is actually sitting. So we actually want it somewhere around here. And I think that'll look a lot better. I think around over here, yeah. I think that'll look a lot better inside of the scene. Yeah, and I'm kind of liking the way that the base of this is actually setting itself up. I think this is looking pretty damn good. I do think that this could use a bit more of a blur. So let's go back to this dragon and let's go down to camera lens blur and let's put it to 2.3 maybe, just to blur it out a tad bit more. I feel like it's just too sharp for where it's sitting inside the scene. And I think this looks pretty damn good for what we're doing right now. And then sometimes what I do to get a better reference on some of this stuff is I'll add Command Y, I'll add a black solid, I'll call this letter box, and then we'll just grab this box masking tool, put it somewhere around here, and we'll drag it out, drop it, invert it, and now we got an idea of how this scene is looking if we put the cinematic box around it. So the next step that I usually use going from here is, sorry, we're just gonna add another adjustment layer. Did we add one? Yes, we did, sorry. And we're gonna call this one looks. And I'm going to use Red Giant's Magic Bullet looks. I don't know what that error is, but I'm just gonna ignore it for now. Yeah, I'm gonna ignore it again. Maybe because I'm 32 bits, I'm not too sure. But what we're gonna do is, I kinda like this preset, this tension preset a lot, but we're gonna try and do it ourselves. So we're gonna add some optical diffusion, and that really just blends in the light in the scene and wraps it around. We're gonna add chromatic aberration, double click this, and then where the blues and yellows are, we're just gonna add it a tad bit, not too crazy, but just enough over here. We're gonna go back to tools and renoiser. This is important to renoise your footage. That's what makes it kind of look more natural. And we're gonna change the strength of it to maybe something around 12%. Yeah, I'm gonna go with that. I like that. I like how it looks. And then from here, sometimes I play with gradients. It just really depends on how it looks when I do it. No, not Mojo, whoops. It just depends on how I do it. Haze and flare, don't like how that looks, so we're gonna ignore that one completely. But the gradient, sometimes I do play with. It really, yeah, like I said, it depends on how it looks when I'm doing it though. So if we go here, we can change the strength of the gradient, maybe around here, and we can use like that brownish tone, and we can just drop it down a tad over here. And I think this is looking pretty damn decent. Maybe this, we'll add to the strength of it. We'll change the lens vignette to around over here. Okay, and let's just check this off for now. Boom. All right, wicked. I really like the way this is looking already. I think it's coming together fairly well for what we've done so far. And for the sake of this tutorial, I'm not trying to get like crazy too deep into how much assets I'd put in, but showing you guys the general idea for what I would do to make something like this look the way I want it to. So, all right, now that we got the looks there, we got that there, I'm gonna add one more layer, and I'm gonna call this curves. And what we're gonna do is add a curves effect to it. And we're gonna go to the blues, and we're just gonna put it up a tad bit just to introduce some into the scene. The reds, we're gonna drop down because I don't like the warmth in the scene at all. Make it a bit cooler. And then our greens, we're gonna pull it up just a tad bit to add a bit of a tint to it. And then our RGB over here, I'm gonna see how it looks if I add some more contrast into the scene. Something around here, and as you can see, that's the difference that made inside of the image. I didn't like how warm it was looking, so I decided it's time to change it, you know? And then we can use the looks on top of it to see how it affects, but I think it's pretty much similar. So what I'm gonna do now is we're gonna press Command A, we're gonna pre-compose everything together, and we're gonna call this Final, moving all attributes. We're gonna go into here, grab this letterbox, copy it, go back into our final comp over here. We're gonna post it on top of here. And I don't know why that went over there, but it's okay. We'll just pull it back. And what we want to do now that's going to add the last piece to it that I think would make it look a lot cooler is we're going to add a shake to it. And you can do this multiple ways. You can use expressions on shakes, but I'm going to use, who is it again? Let me see what it is. Sorry about that. Red Giant's Universe Shake. This one's really good. I love using it for a lot of stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna use this. I'm gonna turn the shake amount down to maybe like 70. And then we're gonna add a motion blur to this. I think I can add a better vignette to this scene, to be honest with you. So I'm just gonna go back to source name, looks. I'm gonna edit this. Okay, no problem. And that vignette, we're gonna just pull it up a little higher, something around there. I like that. Yeah, something around there. Or, no, I'm wrong about that, sorry. No, that was too much. Maybe around there is fine. Okay. And we're gonna go back to the main plate. And typically I'd have to let this load a tad bit more. And yeah, I think that's pretty much where I'm gonna end the tutorial. As you can see, I think we did a pretty good job blending this and putting it together. Yeah, these are some of the techniques I use when I'm blending visual effects together to make something look like it's more immersed into the scene. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment down below, like, share, subscribe to the channel. And yeah, we're gonna have a lot more of this stuff coming up for you guys. So just stay tuned. And if you guys have any suggestions, just let us know and we will try and make sure to get you something that you really like. But yeah, that's how we created this. So take it easy, peace. We'll get some coffee in Blue Mountain, straight from Jamaica.